Right. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are joining us today. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to have you all here. Our panelists have a full agenda, so I'm going to get us started quickly with some housekeeping, and then I'll introduce our panel and we'll get started. First, we are recording this webinar, and the recording will be sent out to everyone that is registered. That recording will also come with a copy of the slide deck as well as a certificate of attendance, and then any other resources or links that are referenced during the discussion today. And next, there is a questions box open to you. You'll see that on your screen. We do encourage questions, but you can also use that forum for comments. So if you have any questions or comments throughout the presentation today, send them in. We'll be responding to you as we go. If there are questions that we feel like will be good for a larger discussion, then we'll flag those and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. So that's it for housekeeping. So I will introduce our lovely panel today. I'm going to start with Andrew DeBerney. He joined Studen in 2017 as a customer support representative, and then he transitioned to our client success team. Before taking those experiences of working hand in hand with our partners and bringing it to his current role as a product manager. So he's been all over the place. Right now, he works daily to provide our partners with solutions for their most pressing challenges. That is Andrew. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you for being here today. Next is Becky. Becky started her teaching. Oh, first off about Becky. And this is why we were about 2 minutes late. We were trying to figure out how to get Becky's camera to work. It is not working, so you don't get to see her today, but you do get to see her lovely photo. And she is, coincidentally, this is totally a coincidence, she is wearing the same shirt. So the Becky that you see here is the Becky for real. So Becky started her teaching career as a middle school and elementary school special ed teacher, where she made connecting with her students a top priority. Before coming to Studen, Becky worked as a preschool teacher with age 2 to 5, and as a coach and class observer to teach for teachers working with children 0 to 5. During this time, she used class to help herself and others make informed decisions about classroom interactions. But regardless of her role as a teacher, coach, observer, or trainer, what Becky enjoys most about the classroom is getting to see and experience the world through the fresh and curious minds of young and new learners. Currently, she is a responsive solutions developer for Studen, and in that role, she is bringing that joy for learning to the creation of new products and to help convey the message that interactions matter, especially now. So that's Becky. Thank you, Becky, for being here. And then we have Mamie. Mamie is a lead class specialist here at Studen with over 20 years of experience in the field of education. Mamie is passionate about providing high-quality trainings, professional development, and in-depth coaching for educators, coaches, and leaders across the country and internationally. Her experience as a preschool to secondary teacher in schools around the world supports her ability to foster meaningful connections with a broad range of educators. Currently, she's joining us from Jacksonville, Florida, with her husband and 2 daughters. She has both a BS and an MA in elementary education from the University of New Mexico. And you can check out her TED Talk on coaching titled Why Self-Efficacy Matters, with over 50K views. I will put that link in the chat once I am done introducing, last but not least, Kate Matthew. She is a former Head Start teacher, family visitor, and a community consultant. She works at the University of Virginia. She joined the Center for Advanced Study of Teaching and Learning, mostly known as CASTLE, at the University of Virginia in 2008. She has the banking time implementation. She was the banking time implementation specialist, on a large randomized control trial where she helped develop and provide training and led the coaches working with the teachers in the field. Additionally, her work includes being the co-author of a Birth to 5 interactions-based curriculum, developing online modules and PD content, and training and supports for coaches. So all that being said, we have a very competent panel today to get us started on our new product, Banking Time. I am going to now pass the floor over to Andrew to introduce our poll.
Awesome.
We'll run the poll.
Thank you, Gloria, for those great introductions, and we're really excited to have you all joining us today. As Gloria mentioned, she's going to put up a poll right now. You learned a little bit about who we are today, and we'd like to learn just a little bit about who you all are that are joining us. So go ahead, it should be pulling up and just asking you to kind of self-identify by your role. This will help us understand you as the audience, help us tailor our conversation to the particular points or values that may most interest you, so we can make the most and best use of your time. As the polls are coming in, I'm really excited to see that we have a large teacher population, and that's really exciting. As we'll see next, one of the things we'll be doing today is taking an early look or a preview of the Banking Time offering. So I'm excited that there are a huge amount of coaches and teachers who are going to get to see that today and learn a lot more about what it is Banking Time can do for you, as well as how you can learn to bank time. So we can see here that, as I was mentioning, I could see the poll while it was going. Almost half of you are teachers. Another almost 40% are coaches, and so we're really excited to have you all here. If you want to go to the next slide, Gloria, I can talk a little bit more just about what we're going to spend our time doing today.
Can you not see my screen?
I'm only still seeing the poll, but
really?
let me.
This happened last time. Okay, hold on. Give me a second.
And while that's being pulled up, I can go ahead and chat about what we're going to be chatting about today. So as you saw, we have a great group of panelists here who are professionals not just in the early childhood space, but also have experience with Banking Time and love Banking Time. So they are definitely the folks to share this new offering with you. So we're going to start where we want to make sure that we're always starting and just grounding ourselves in the importance of relationships and how high quality interactions and effective interactions can have positive impact on child outcomes, which is, that's what we are all in the business of doing, supporting children in our care as they grow and learn. We're going to introduce Banking Time concepts, so try to help you understand who's Banking Time for. How can Banking Time help you? We're going to talk about the research behind Banking Time and where it came from and what we've seen it do for other educators in the field. And as I mentioned, we're going to spend some time showcasing a little bit of the offering so that you all can get a sampler, if you will, of the supports that we'll have available for you with these new trainings and online courses. So with that, I'm going to pass the torch over to Mamie, and she's going to start to help us center again, as I mentioned, into the importance of relationships and impact on child outcomes.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Andrew. And I know we have so many teachers on the line and coaches, so this is a wonderful question to ask all of you as we ground in your daily practice. So we have a question to think, as we're thinking about the importance of investing in relationships, let's consider how might a child feel if they don't have a connection with a teacher in their classroom. So think about the kids in your classroom, the kids you've taught previously. Think about how might those children have felt or would feel if they don't have a connection, a close, meaningful, trusting connection with the teacher in their classroom. Let's just write your thoughts in the chat box. So I'm excited to see some ideas come in. What are some of those words that would describe how kids might feel if they don't have connections? And Gloria, I don't know, I've not seen any chats coming in.
Andrew, do you see what's coming in?
Yep, so it looks like you all may not have access to chat, but I do see in the questions y'all are being creative and utilizing the questions to send through some of that feedback so we can look at the questions sections to see some of the responses y'all are sharing.
That's right. Mamie, you're going to want to look at the questions section of your GoTo rather than the chat. Thanks, Andrew.
I have the question section open and it's still blank. So maybe
So,
Andrew could
yep,
read
I'll
some.
read some off. Yeah, absolutely. So we have overwhelmed, isolated and alone.
Mhm.
A
Yeah,
couple of people have said isolated and lonely.
yeah,
They don't feeling like they don't belong, sad or unloved, unsafe, alienated, frightened, and as you might guess, it goes on and it goes on in that vein, right? Because we all can put ourselves in that
right.
mindset.
Yeah, and that's of course not how we want any child to ever feel in our learning environment, because that emotional support is so incredibly important. We know that children learn differently with adults that they know love them and care for them and see them and hear them, and that they can trust that that adult will always have their back. And so it's so important that we not have any children in our classroom who are feeling isolated and alone and scared and frightened, because that keeps them from being able to not only make relationships and connect with the adults and the other peers in the classroom, but it keeps them from being able to be in a space to be able to learn, and to be able to really engage in that learning process.
Something
And
else
so
that's
thank you
coming
so
up,
much for writing that
maybe.
in. Yes,
Oh,
Andrew.
sorry, is just self-blame, which I think is something that we probably don't think
Oh,
about as well. But if
yeah.
I'm if I feel left out, is it me?
It must be me, right? And that's probably an experience that the child has outside of the classroom as well, and then it's getting compounded in the classroom. And these early experiences matter so much. The types of relationship a child has with a teacher in the early years is going to influence their expectation of the types of relationships they're going to be able to have with teachers throughout their learning career. And we really want to ensure that our relationships early on, our children don't feel those feelings that were talked about. And so how do we invest in those relationships so we can enhance and avoid those types of feelings? Let's go to the next slide, Gloria, because I would like to get your read on your thoughts as well as the educator. How might you feel as an educator, or for coaches working with teachers? What are those feelings when the educator has difficulty connecting with the child in their classroom? What kind of feelings does that bring about for the teachers? How do you feel when you have a child you just have such a hard time connecting with?
And again, please, yeah, go ahead and put those into the questions box, as the chat isn't available. But definitely seeing, frustrated and overwhelmed. So some similar feelings coming
Similar.
through.
Yeah.
And again, disappointed in myself, unprepared.
Is it
You know,
me, right? Is there a reason why I can't connect?
yeah, and frustration and failure coming up quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's not just the interactions that you're having with that child that are being compromised and you're feeling frustrated, but it's likely the child's not learning and gaining at the same level, or engaging or behaving at the same level that you would like them to be in your classroom. And so there's a wide variety of ways that you're feeling, and that a lot of those negative feelings that you're having. And so it's so important. We don't want our teachers to be feeling this way. We don't want the children to be feeling this way. How can we support this relationship so it doesn't continue in a cycle of negativity that was just keeps these feelings happening for both the teacher and the child? And so I'm so excited to be able to present a solution to you to help you think about how to enhance these relationships so that all of the children in your classroom have access to a deep relationship and an opportunity to, in equity in their opportunity to learn with each other.
Awesome. Thank you, Mamie, for leading those conversations and those questions to just get us all in the right frame of mind. One of the responses that came up that I think is a really good transition to the introduction you're about to give us, Kate. One of the things that came through was, I think I need to continue to reach out to keep trying. I need to keep trying to
Always.
connect with this child. And I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
perfect place for me to say, transition to Kate and ask her to give us an introduction to what banking time is.
Thanks, Andrew. So I think, especially from the comments in the chat, that I think and hope we can all agree that children and teachers benefit when they feel and they are genuinely connected with each other. And like Mimi said, the good news is that we have help for that. Banking time can help to build on these critical connections. So I wanted to, let's first just take a few moments to watch a short video module. In it, we'll explore some basics about how a teacher's role may be different during a banking time session. It's all about slowing down and following the child's lead to convey interest, acceptance, and to strengthen connections.
In banking time, your role is slightly different from your usual role. Instead of finding teachable moments or supporting a specific skill, you're following the child's lead to convey acceptance and interest in them. Simply be together, slow down and connect, and follow the child. Let's see what that looks like in practice.
For many teachers, one of the hardest things about banking time sessions is that you're not supposed to direct the play and interactions that are happening. You're a teacher, so it may feel quite awkward for you to not ask questions or teach a skill. But banking time sessions are most successful when you focus on following rather than leading the session. Let's see what a child-led session looks like. This teacher is following a child's lead.
Yay! I think when my finger goes in here, then do it cross. Okay. Then do your cross. I say now I'm going to work cross. Of course. Okay.
Please show me how it goes across.
Okay.
Okay.
Notice how this teacher is actively engaged, but she's following rather than leading the play. She's letting the child know that she's interested and excited about his ideas. And these messages strengthen their relationship. Let's cover a few important tips that will help you successfully implement a child-led banking time session. First, provide choice in the activity and allow children to switch between activities as they wish. In the video we just watched, this boy chose to play with the drums, and you can tell that he's clearly engaged in this activity. Some teachers find it useful to have a special bin full of materials that encourage child-directed play, such as art supplies, dolls, or blocks for the child to choose from. It's best to avoid materials that could lead to a more teacher-directed session, such as games with rules, books, or difficult puzzles. Once the child selects an activity, give them the freedom to control it. Notice how this teacher let the boy control the play.
I say now I'm going to work cross.
Awesome. So as we kind of watch that short clip, and that's a short piece of much more just great examples and walkthroughs that we have in this offering. Thinking, both to you all here on the panel as well as you all joining us as guests, and feel free to put your thoughts into the question channel. What resonated with you about that short clip that we just watched? I don't see anything coming in just yet in the question box, but maybe or Kate or Becky, what did you all what key takeaways might you all have seen in that opening clip that would be important for our participants to take away today?
One thing that stood out to me was how actively engaged the teacher was in this interaction. She wasn't passively sitting back, even though she was allowing the child to take the lead. She was totally present and responsive.
Yeah, some of the things that came in just to that point, I see teaching sensitivity, teacher flexibility, student autonomy. Yeah.
I love all that class.
Andrew, if I can add, she's not teaching anything, right? So I think that's like a distinction in this clip is that, not that obviously there's nothing wrong with teaching things, but she's not doing that here. She's really following what he wants to be conveying to her. So she's not saying, what shape is this, and what noise are we making, and what color is this, and like taking advantage of all those teachable moments, which are so critical throughout the day, but this is just different. This part of the day is just different.
And I love how it's genuine, right? He is genuinely leading the play and she's genuinely interested and following his lead. And it just feels like a really authentic connection.
Yeah, and that was definitely one thing that I see coming in here. Is if you look at the body language, you can tell that he is more comfortable, the child there, the boy. And to what you all have been saying, that the child is leading. The teacher is engaged. The teacher is excited about what they're doing. Genuine interest. I'm just reading through some of these. You know, the teacher was responsive. The teacher is learning from the child as well. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So exactly, you know, there's this, as the video mentioned, this is a little bit different from how you may traditionally think about or approach spending time interacting with a student, but the student leading of the activity, I think, is really the key to come out of this particular video.
And just one more thing to add is that, you know, if they're in this interaction, I'm familiar with this situation, is that, you know, that's not necessarily the norm for their interactions in their relationship, right? So like if they're having a banking time session, that means that they have identified a need to strengthen that connection. And so it's really, you know, makes my heart sing to see them connecting in a banking time session.
Absolutely. And so I think maybe what might be helpful, you know, we've been talking about some of the pieces of the banking time session, and I think this next slide that Becky is going to introduce really helps us focus in on, this is not something new, something different, something difficult with lots of different steps. It's a process that you can do today.
Yeah, so banking time is, as we've been talking about, the purpose of it is to nurture stronger, more equitable educator-child relationships. And when we're thinking about banking time, there's kind of a pathway that we follow. So we start with planning time using the guidance that we provide in the banking time resources. The heart of the session really is about connecting with that child. And then we're nurturing that growing relationship outside of banking time. So kind of carrying those feelings through the rest of the interactions in the classroom. So not just during that banking time session, but during your routines and transitions, your small group and whole group, during free play. And by kind of following that pathway, you can really strengthen that relationship, which, as you know, we talked about with Mamie, when there is that strong connection, then we're minimizing those feelings of isolation and fear and stress. And when we minimize those feelings, we make space for a child to take risks and to grow and to really benefit more from all of their time in the classroom, not just from their banking time opportunities. So what I want to do now is give you guys a look at the banking time training that we've put together. And it's a little bit of a sneak peek. We're going to do a few sections from the facilitated training, very much a truncated example of it. So if Gloria will transfer over screen sharing, which should happen in just a moment here, I'll get us right into the PowerPoint.
You should be all set, Becky. There you go.
Great. Okay. So as I said, I'm kind of hopping in the middle here. I'm going to start off with an overview of the what and why of banking time. So what is banking time? Banking time improves the quality of educator-child exchanges. And I just want to point out, we're intentionally using that term educator because when we're looking at banking time, we're looking at infant all the way through third grade. So we want to make sure that people recognize this is for a wide variety of ages. It can disrupt negative interaction patterns. So as Kate was pointing out after that clip, you're engaging in banking time with a child that you don't currently have a strong connection with, and that you might actually have some actual tension with. And so banking time can help disrupt those negative interaction patterns. Banking time provides new relational information to the teacher and the child. So the teacher learns about the child learns more about the teacher. And they learn about, cues and responsiveness, and it really helps build that relationship and build that trust. Banking time is made up of short 10 to 15 minute one-on-one child-led play-based sessions that occur about 2 to 3 times a week. They're regular and predictable sessions, and they typically last between 3 and 8 weeks. And that group of sessions over 3 to 8 weeks is what we would refer to as a banking time cycle. So how does banking time work? When you think about a banking time session, it provides space for an educator to get to know specific children. These sessions are purposeful and highly contained interactions. And what we mean by highly contained is that they're one-on-one, they take place in an area in the classroom or in the learning setting where there's opportunity for you as the educator to really focus on that child's individual cues and to respond genuinely, like we saw in that nice clip. And so what we end up getting out of that from the educator's perspective, the educator understands the child more completely. They have new relational information about their verbal and nonverbal cues, about strategies that are more effective, about their likes and dislikes. And because of that, we find that the educator is more likely to respond sensitively and effectively to the child. So let's flip this around and think about this from the child's perspective. Through the course of banking time sessions, the child has the space and the time to get to know you as the educator. Again, they're very purposeful and highly contained interactions that lead to the child being able to experience their educator's sensitivity and responsiveness. It gives them new relational information about how to see you as a source of security and as a resource for them to support them as they learn and grow and take risks and explore. And we know that taking risks and exploring are key to how young children learn and grow developmentally. And it gives them an increased connection to the educator so that later, when there is a need for support, that child feels confident and comfortable approaching the educator. So why is it called banking time? We recognize that relationships are resources. And so if we can invest in that relational capital, that gives us more of that positive relationship time. So we're decreasing the amount of time stuck in that cycle of negativity, and we're increasing the amount of time where we're engaging positively with those children. And that allows us to draw upon this capital in the classroom when children experience challenges or need additional support. So let's think about planning for banking time. Planning for banking time has 4 different steps. We're going to go into each one of those a little bit more in depth. The first step is choosing a child. So as Kate mentioned, when we're engaging in a banking time session or a banking time cycle, we're engaging with a child that we don't necessarily have easy relationship with, or one that has an element of tension to it. So when we're thinking about how to choose a child, you want to reflect on your relationship with each child and identify those you'd like to connect with by investing your relationship capital. Some things to think about when you're choosing a child. you want to think about, first off, what are their likes and dislikes? How do they communicate? What are their cues? How do they best respond? But you also want to take that a little bit deeper and think about, what does this child need from you? What are your expectations of this child or of yourself? You want to also consider what assumptions you're making about this child and how those assumptions shape your behaviors and attitudes toward them. These all go into how you approach that relationship. Once you've chosen a child, the next step is to pay attention to your schedule and location. So schedule a banking time session and plan for where you're going to have that. Some things to consider when you're planning when and where to have a banking time session. We want to think about we want to be able to plan for regular and predictable sessions that are relatively free of distractions. So thinking about your own context, some things that you want to consider when you're scheduling banking time sessions would be keeping in mind when the child, preferred activities that the child likes to do. You don't want to schedule a banking time session during their, favorite activities. You also want to keep in mind what parts of your schedule are immovable. When do you not have flexibility to have that banking time session? Other things to keep in mind would be, when will it really be more feasible for you to have a banking time session? I always encourage people to think about what times of their day have a fewer number of children or have additional adult support in the classroom, whether it's another volunteer or an additional teacher, paraprofessional that's available to support you. When you're thinking about a location for banking time, we want to have time that is relatively free of distractions. So your location is going to help you with that. So perhaps you're looking at a quiet place in the hallway or a corner of the classroom that isn't right in the middle of all the busyness that we know takes place in preschool classrooms and in moving on up through K3 as well. Another thing to keep in mind with your location for banking time is you want to also consider where you'll find space that is predictable and regular. You don't want to have to cancel a banking time session because you don't have access to a space. So you're looking for spaces that you can predictably use on a schedule that are relatively free of distractions. As I mentioned, a quiet hallway, a porch, the library, a corner of the room or playground. So banking time sessions don't have to happen just indoors. They can happen outdoors as well. Let's talk a little bit about activities and materials for a banking time session. You're looking for age-appropriate materials that are suitable to the child, that are of interest to the child, that encourage exploration, that are open-ended, and without stereotypes. A bin or a box of toys that are different from those that are used daily in the learning setting can also be helpful when you're thinking about your activities and materials. So think about things like art materials, blocks, little people or animals or cars, even open-ended materials like a box of buttons or feathers, or even things like cups and spoons and things like that at the sand table. Those would be also very appropriate for banking time. And then we introduce banking time to the child. Some important elements to convey to a child when you're introducing banking time to them You want to emphasize that you are interested in getting to know the child better. Explain that your choice to work with the child stems from a genuine desire to understand them and to build a deeper relationship, and honestly, to have fun. You want to let the child know that the session is going to happen on certain days and at certain times. And this is really important. The banking time session is not contingent upon their behavior. It's not a reward or a punishment. So even that child that has had a really, and let me take that back, especially that child that has had a really rough morning or gotten into a lot of conflict with peers, or maybe even you, even with those behaviors, we still want to engage in that banking time session. You also want to let the child know that this is going to be normal, different from the normal classroom time, because it's just going to be the two of you, that this is your time to get to know each other better, to play together, to have fun, and really enjoy that time. And you want to encourage open communication about the upcoming banking time sessions. So let the child know when they're going to be happening. And one thing, whoop, nope, that slide doesn't, I didn't use that one, so I'll just mention it. Some things to consider would be having picture schedules for children that have that understanding of time, or for children that have other ways of communicating, to let them know that this banking time session is coming up and they can look forward to it. Depending on the age of the child that you're working with, you might not need to go through all of these steps so formally. If you're working with, let's say, an 18-month-old, these elements would be less relevant to an 18-month-old. So really think about the developmental age of your child, as well as their language abilities when you're introducing that banking time. So let's get into a little bit of conducting a banking time session. The child and educator roles for banking time are a little bit different than your roles during the rest of the day. The child's role is to choose the activity, to lead the interaction, and to guide the discussion, just like we saw in that clip that Kate introduced for us. The educator's role is to observe the child's actions, follow the child's lead, and to respond contingently to the child. So if you think back to that video that we watched, you'll notice that the teacher's actions and comments followed the same conversational direction as the child, but also followed along with what the child was doing, how the child was leading. Teaching is not part of the educator's role during banking time sessions. We want teachers to convey interest, sensitivity, understanding, and connection while encouraging the child's autonomy and freedom. Some banking time practices. So there are 4 key practices that you'll notice in banking time: observing, narrating, labeling, and developing relational themes. We're going to go into each one of these a little bit more in depth. And starting off with narrating. So as I mentioned, I'm jumping over a little bit there. When we're looking at narrating, there are 3 different ways that a teacher can narrate in a banking time session. We have reflection, where the teacher is repeating the child's words with slight modification. But I know that a lot of you are familiar, or some of you are familiar with class from your comments earlier in this webinar. And so when you're thinking about reflection, there's a lot of that repetition and extension in there. So the teacher is repeating what the child has to say, and then adding a little bit more to that. We have the sportscaster technique, where the educator describes out loud what the child is doing while they're doing it. And imitation, quietly imitating what the child is doing. Yesterday, I was sharing this training with a group of educators at a migrant Head Start, and one of the participants said, you know, I have a little girl that I want to do banking time with, but she's very reserved, very quiet, and I'm afraid that all of this language would be overwhelming to her. And so we spent a little bit of time talking about how these different techniques can be used to kind of meet the different needs of different children. And we identified that imitation would really go a long way with that child who was perhaps a little bit more reserved and a little bit more overwhelmed and hesitant. So when we're looking at narrating, we're using a combination of all three of these. Let's take a minute here and let's watch some video of some sportscasting. So what I want you to do is, while this video is playing, it's only about 20 to 30 seconds, I want you to watch the child and carefully describe their actions, and watch the educator and describe the educator's actions as well. Thinking about sportscasting, that describing what the child is doing while they are doing it. And if you want to chat your observations into the questions box, I'm sure Andrew will read some of those out for us.
Oh, you want to bounce? Bouncing, bouncing up and down, up and down, up and down, bouncing, bouncing up and down all day long. Your mind is bouncing up and down, up and down, up and down. Your mind is bouncing up and down.
So what did you notice for narrating sportscasting in that little clip?
And I'm looking at the questions box just to see if anyone is participating in this piece. Both are engaged.
Mm-hmm. And think about the educator's language. She was describing what the child was doing while the child was doing it. Did anyone notice anything about child-led interactions?
Here we go. We have some more things coming. So yes, the child action engagement. She was saying what the child was doing. The teacher was singing. Added words to the action, so names for what the child was doing. Mm-hmm. Teacher singing. Use the child's name. Parallel talk. Some more class terms coming back in there.
Yes. Yeah, so we see in this that in this video, just like you guys mentioned, we see that this teacher is describing what the child's doing while they're doing that. And what that does is it lets the child know that they're important, among many other things. One thing that I wanted to point out about this training is that we do have options for different age levels. So we just watched a toddler clip, but we're also going to watch another clip here of a kindergartner or pre-K. And so let's see what we can see for sportscasting with this slightly older child.
And see you keep moving your fingers so that they don't get caught in the scissors. The paper is stuck to your fingers. I'm picking up more paper.
I'm going to pause it right there because we seem to have a delay, and I think we got enough of an example there anyway. So the reason why I wanted to show both of those clips was to point out that we've made this training kind of adaptable to your learning settings. So we have a variety of videos ranging from infants all the way through 3rd grade. And when you're participating in this facilitated training, your facilitator will choose the appropriate videos based on the age level of most of the folks within the training. Okay, and that was what I wanted to share with you from the banking time facilitated session. So I'm going to stop sharing screen and move it back to Gloria to wrap up.
Yep, and while that transition is happening, I think we keep getting great questions that are good transition points. So I think someone was trying to figure out if that was Kate in that last video. And while I don't believe it was, or maybe it was, yep, it was, perfect transition for Kate to share with us. You know, I think we talked a lot about what banking time is, but I think there's always that question, well, how do I know it'll work? Or maybe more importantly, how do I know it'll work for me? And so I'm really excited that Kate can join us and talk about her experiences, both within the research and with seeing the outcomes that banking time has been able to provide for teachers and students.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, I was pregnant with my first son in that video, so a lot of memories kind of popping up when I saw that one there. But so, you know, banking time has been studied across various settings, but the strongest findings come from a randomized control trial led by Dr. Amanda Williford at the University of Virginia, which focused on the banking time's effects of children's externalizing behaviors. So in other words, behaviors that teachers find disruptive or negative. So I was fortunate to serve as the implementation specialist supporting our training and coaching for this study. So in this study, 183 teachers identified 3 children that were displaying the highest levels of disruptive behaviors in their classroom. And the classrooms were randomly assigned to one of 3 groups. So the first group conducted cycles of banking time, like Becky was just describing, with each child. So they worked with a banking time coach and they learned the techniques, and they had 2 to 3 sessions a week for about 7 weeks with each of the children. The second group also had one-on-one sessions with each child for 7 weeks, but they didn't learn or use the specific banking time techniques. So we called this child time. And finally, the third group went on with their classroom lives, just business as usual. They weren't asked to change anything. So what we learned is that teachers found that children in both the banking time and child time groups showed declines in disruptive behaviors and an increase in effortful control. I can never say that word right. Effortful control. So which is great, right? Because it means that just spending dedicated time with children, as in the child time group, can lead to positive gains. But we also found that there are added benefits for children and teachers in the banking time group. So in addition to showing the declines in disruptive behaviors, those children had fewer negative interactions with teachers and even had lower stress levels across the day compared to kids in the child or business as usual groups. And we measured this, which I think is pretty cool. We measured this by comparing their cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone in our bodies across the day. So the key takeaways here are that just spending one-on-one time with children can be powerful. It can improve behavior, which is great. But it's not just the time spent, it's also how the time is spent. And banking time can increase these benefits by also leading to fewer negative interactions and an adaptive stress response. So in addition to this big, huge study. In other studies, banking time has led to teachers feeling increased closeness with children, higher levels of tolerance for frustration, which we can all use on some days, right? Banking time also led to a decrease in conduct problems for children, and some techniques such as observing and narrating, like Becky was just talking about, specifically led to increased engagement with the teacher in the classroom. So kids showed signs of seeking their teacher, sharing smiles, and generally being more connected with their teacher. Anecdotally, from my personal experience, so not hard research, but my personal experience supporting teachers and coaches to use banking time is that they love it. The feedback I hear is that it's amazing that something that can seem so simple can have such a big impact. Stories from teachers on how they see big changes in the ways children turn to them or trust them. It's a game changer. I often hear teachers that are implementing banking time asking for more time with banking time or brainstorming with their coach creative ways to fit them in. So both of which speak to the fact that once they've used it, they want more of it. They like the outcomes that they're seeing. Ultimately, relationships are the gatekeeper of opportunities, and that's for both social, emotional, and academic learning, as we've heard the panel talking about today. And when relationships are strong, that gate is wide open to opportunities to learn and connect in the classroom. And when the relationship isn't quite where it needs to be, kids can be shut out from experiencing the same opportunities as their peers. And often those are really the kids that need us the most. Intentionally building relationships with every child really matters. And our research shows that banking time can be a critical tool in our toolbox for building those all-important connections.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I think there are a lot of light bulb or aha moments that were kind of coming up in the questions box as you were kind of talking through not just the impact on children, but the impact on teachers as well, who are using the banking time model. I think if we went to the next slide, there's actually a quote from a participant in the research, and that kind of highlights. I don't know if one of the panelists want to kind of just highlight some of the key points of this quote or the takeaways from Teacher Kelly, who some of you may recognize from some of our videos.
I'll go ahead and read it. Teacher-child interactions matter because that's the #1 way that we build relationships with kids. The best way to get anything out of them is to bank time with them. Spend as much time interacting with them as possible. Then down the road, if there's a problem with behavior, you already have this strong relationship established. And then that frees you up to help them with their academics, social engagement, and problem-solving abilities. If you're not interacting with them, none of those other steps are going to take place.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Thank you. And so I know we have shared quite a bit today, and I think I've seen a couple of questions come through that we haven't had a chance to answer just yet. We have a few minutes left here, so I'm wondering, Gloria, as you've been managing the chat box, if there are any questions you wanted to highlight. I know there were two that stood out to me so far that I think our panelists could talk a bit more about. One, why are we calling it, or why banking time? And then two, this also seems like it could work between a director and the staff that they support. And so just talking about, like, you know, those two ideas I think might help people understand banking time a little better.
Yeah, you guys can start. Did you want me to offer up more questions, or did you want to start with those?
Yeah, let's start with why we call it banking time. So I know in the research, banking time was kind of the term that came back from the work that y'all were doing, and so if you could maybe explain to our audience why did that name come up, and why does that name resonate?
Sure, is that one to me?
Yes.
Okay, so I think, you know, the name banking time comes from the idea that if you are kind of making deposits, you're like proactively building your relationship. And then later when there may be conflict or you may need to draw, you know, on that relationship capital in the classroom in different situations. So the banking time is really a proactive way to build that relationship to improve all the relationships in the classroom.
Awesome. Exactly. I think of it as that's why we said investing in relationships, because it's almost like a bank of goodwill that is built up. So when you're in those difficult moments, you can remember that this is somebody that I can trust and rely on, and continue a positive relation, and not, again, sink back into those cycles of negative, repetitive negative cycles that can happen.
I think, Andrew, if you think about like relationships that you have, oh, sorry, Mimi, you can go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. the relationship you have, that you have already banked a lot of time with your best friend. You've already banked a lot of time with your, significant other, or, other important people in your life. And so then when you have to go through something together, or you have to face a challenge together, or you have a conflict together, then you just have that trust level and that connection that you can really, gives you the strength and gives them the strength to be able to do it. And so that's the way I like to think about, like, having that really strong foundation is something that you've banked.
And Kate, I like how you took that to the adult level, right? Because the other question was, could we have banking time between teachers, educators, and administrators, or educators and coaches? And absolutely, of course, the structure will be different. You won't necessarily be playing with toys, but ensuring that you, again, invest in that time so that you really know each other, you really trust each other, you really connect, so that when challenges or stressors come down the way, you have that relationship that is a real strong foundation to stand upon.
Yeah, and in fact,
about how we use it in everything, right? Like, so like it's like these techniques work with all the adults in your life too, for sure.
And a personal story, the first time I heard of banking time was 2 years ago when I was having trouble with a colleague internally, and my supervisor said, well, have you tried getting to know them? Have you tried banking time? And that was my first introduction, and I did. I spent some time getting to know the colleague, and our troubles disappeared. We were able to have a relationship that we enjoyed being around each other and working with each other. So absolutely can work with adult to adult, as well as educator-child interactions.
I'm going to offer up one more question just because it's come up a couple of times now in the chat. How is the experience with using banking time with students with relationship difficulties or trauma? And then the similar question that came in was, where did it go? How do you incorporate trauma strategies when implementing banking time?
Yeah. Kate, I'm wondering if you probably have had the most experience with those. Did you want to respond to that?
Sure. I think that's it's a pretty complex question, but I think, like, just at the core is, the core of trauma-informed care would be, really getting to know children and knowing what they need and meeting them right where they are and providing really sensitive responses to them. And banking time is something that really helps teachers to do that in the session, but then also taking those techniques out of the session. It takes away that, like, I'm here to just teach you, which again is like great, and it's good, we have to learn like some academics and facts, but it takes that away, and it just really is about, I'm here for you. There are relational themes that you're working on throughout the sessions, and so it can really be around, like, I'm here for you, you are safe here, I am a resource for you. And so I think all of those are really important, particularly for children who have experienced some type of trauma. And so part of banking time is learning how to intentionally set, I don't mean to like give away too much, but like is how to intentionally set those themes and knowing what each child needs from you, and then making, intentionally supporting that theme.
And I'll just piggyback on that real quick. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mimi.
I was just going to say, I worked with a teacher who had a child who clearly had trauma, who had not spoken to the teacher in an entire year, barely even made eye contact with the teacher. And so we started using banking time. And I think the child really enjoyed the opportunity to be one-on-one with the teacher. And also the teacher didn't ask questions anymore. Banking time was the teacher following that child's lead. And after several sessions, the teacher started to see a difference. The child started to make eye contact with the teacher and would answer questions in class with a yes or no, which was groundbreaking for this child because she had not said anything in the classroom prior. And the teacher was actually crying to me and said, if someone had told me earlier in the year, all I needed to do was sit down and spend time with this child one-on-one and not ask questions and just follow their lead, I could have been doing this for 8 months and we would be in a different place right now. So she was so excited to get that tool, to get that support, and to see that amazing change that it was making in a child who had clearly experienced a lot of trauma in her life.
It gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, me too. Every time I say it, I almost cried every time I say it. So.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Mimi. That is just a perfect segue into the next slide here. So we haven't been able to get to all of your questions today. But, you know, we spend a lot of time talking about the benefits and the importance of making time. And so naturally, we want to make sure that we are supporting you with this specific technique. And so we are offering an online course that is now available for order. It's called Banking Time, Investing in Relationships. It's an online course that will help your staff learn to promote children's development and learning and maximize their potential by making the time and space to invest in those positive relationships with the children who need it the most. So you can learn more at teachstone.com/banking time, I believe is the URL, but my colleague will put that in the chat for you all to see that as well. And then very quickly before you leave, another thing for teachers, on September 13th through 17th, we are offering a free virtual series designed to support early childhood teachers as they return to the classroom. So whether you're new to class or you are a class expert, there will be content for everyone. I have a couple or a few of the sessions listed here, but there's going to be so much more. It's a full week full of content. There will be sessions for infant and toddler and pre-K teachers, as well as sessions in Spanish. So very exciting stuff. It is very free. I highly recommend for everyone to register. You can do so at teachstone.com/teacher series. My colleague will also put that in the chat. I want to thank my panelists today, Andrew, Kate, Mamie, and Becky. Oh, wait. Oh, no, I messed up. We have a poll. We have one more poll, guys. If you are interested in the Banking Time course and want to learn more, please fill out this poll. We will make sure that we have someone reach out to you to give you more information and talk about how Making Time can support you if you're a teacher or your staff, if you're a coach or an admin or something of that sort. So I'm just going to give it a couple of seconds here, but while that's running, I do want to thank our panelists, Andrew, Kate, Mamie, and Becky. Your time is greatly appreciated. And thank you all out there for using your valuable time today to join us today. But that will wrap us up. Let me see, these responses are still coming in. I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds and then I will end the poll. And that'll be all for today. So thank you, everyone. Take care. And we will see you all next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Gloria. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.